Digital acceleration is here. Health systems are walking the path, but are they in the right direction? Welcome to Patient Journey Pioneers, roadmaps from the top digital leaders in healthcare, who share insights and strategies that are pushing the patient journey to new heights. This podcast is brought to you by Hyro, and I'm your host, Liat Kozuch. Today we have a very special guest who I had a chance to meet personally at HIMSS this year. He won numerous awards, including HIMSS and Chime 2013 CIO of the Year, recognized as one of the top 100 leaders by CIO in Computer World, named by Becker's as 2015 top healthcare IT executive, and one of the 17 most influential people in healthcare. Today he serves as CEO of Divurgent and was former CIO at Cleveland Clinic. I'm going to take a breather here because the list goes on, but I'll pause and give a warm welcome to our friend Edward Marx. Edward, it's great to have you here with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to share whatever I can. And of course, all those accolades, while very kind, are really a reflection of the teams and the organizations that I served with. So I just happened to be in the right spot at the right time, but it was really those teams that made all that magic happen.
But it's also your commitment and devotion to the healthcare industry that really is amazing. So we're going to be bringing that out in today's discussion. For anyone who's been in healthcare IT industry, we know Ed also is a best-selling author of several books. And Ed, I actually waited very patiently on a long line at HIMSS at the ClickSoft booth to get your signature on one of your most recent bestsellers, Healthcare Digital Transformation. And your next book will be for the Mayo Clinic.
So I'm really excited. I'm writing a book for Mayo Clinic Press with the CIO of Mayo Clinic, Chris Ross, and we both had these horrific episodes with cancer, but both healed. And so we're writing about patient experience, but really it's a book that's going to be going to the public market. So it's not going to be a healthcare book, but it's going to be sold in, everywhere you'd see other books, like New York Times bestseller type books. And so it's completely flipping the script. So it's kind of fun to write.
That's interesting. Looking forward to seeing that as well. Where are we catching you right now?
So I'm in the great city of New York. This is the first time back since the pandemic. Of course, I served here as CIO at New York City Health and Hospitals 2015, 2018. So it's kind of fun to be back and catch up with a lot of my friends and see a show or two. So it's been a lot of fun.
I'm going to jump right into it. I want us to rewind. You have a lot to share and many accomplishments, but one fun fact is that Ed started his healthcare journey as a janitor at a medical center at age 16. So why don't we go all the way back and, run us through your timeline?
Yeah, I literally had a job opportunity at a medical clinic at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs, Colorado. One of my friends already worked there. He cleaned out the dental department, and there was an opening for some other person to come in and do the medical clinic. And, had an emergency room and a pretty big multi-specialty clinic. And it was like, okay, I got to work with a friend. And it was a great job because it was sort of after hours, except for the ED, of course, which was 24/7. But basically, we could come in anytime after 5 or 6 p.m. And as long as we did the sweeping, the mopping, taking out the trash by 7 a.m. the next morning, we were good to go. So for a teenager that was in sports and all kinds of stuff, it was really a flexible job and paid well. And, it was there while I was cleaning these offices, I really felt this kindred spirit to I want to serve in healthcare. And I didn't know at the time, I was 16 and 17. I didn't know how it would manifest itself, whether I'd be, I certainly never would have thought about CIO but it would have been a physician or a nurse. I just didn't know, but I just knew I had this connection. So, when I was graduating from high school, I was the youngest of 7, kind of a lower mid-class family. We all had this expectation we'd all be going to college, but we had to earn our own way. And so the Army Reserves offered me this opportunity to get a little bit of a scholarship if I joined, and I took a test. I joined, and they said, you could be anything you want. So I looked at the list of things, and one of them was combat medic. And I was like, yes, that feels right based on my janitor experience. And so after that, I was hooked. And it was like, okay, whatever I do in life, I really wanted to be in healthcare. So it took a little while, I went through school and graduated and was actually a combat engineer officer. But there was always this tug back to healthcare. And so I got pulled back in. Sure enough, I worked in a little bit in the OR. I worked in a strategy office. And finally, my big break came where I got into IT. And then once I got into IT and realized the power at the intersection of clinical, business, and tech, to really save people's lives, which in this case was my firstborn daughter, I was like, this is my mission in life, to to do all those things, leverage technology to save people's lives. I remember just looking around in this one particular office and looking, I saw the accolades of the particular physician on the wall, and I saw the exam room, and even though I was emptying the trash and sweeping floors and stuff, it was like, wow, I want to be part of something like this. I want to help people.
That's what, where the seed was planted.
It really was this key central driver in my career, and I got married really early and had kids early. And so I was, really focused on trying to find a career and being very purposeful. So I kept coming back to healthcare, and I would take any job. In fact, the first job I could get, so by this time I had some degrees, and I was told that I was overeducated or underexperienced. So I was in that zone where I'd apply for these great healthcare jobs, but they're like, you have no experience. And then I would take lesser healthcare jobs that didn't require a lot of experience, but I was overeducated. And so another little fact that very, very few people know is that I applied to be an anesthesia tech at the local hospital. They had a 6-week temporary job for anesthesia tech. And I did not disclose that I had degrees other than my combat medic. So I got the interview. And at the interview, I disclosed that I had these degrees. And they said, oh, that's great. They didn't care because it was only a 6-week gig, but that gig led to being doubled. And then while I was there, I developed a relationship with the clinicians and the staff of the OR, and they were implementing a new computer system, and they weren't really part of the IT. IT really didn't have the OR yet for whatever reason. And so they were like, can you help? Because I had a little bit of computer knowledge now because I'd been a combat engineer officer. So there's some technical aspects to that. And they're like, can you help us implement this system for the OR? And I was like, sure. So that's sort of how I got into full-time. And then I was in the OR, and it was just a fascinating environment. I contemplated becoming a physician, but at that point, again, I was in a young family, and I was like, I don't think I could muster the will, the strength, the money to go to med school. So there's got to be something else, and something else sure did come along.
We also just hosted Jake Dorst, CIO and Innovation Officer at Tau Forest Health System. One of his biggest pieces of advice was be everywhere and look at every single room in the hospital, really roaming the rooms and getting to know all of the players in the field in order to become the best CIO possible. So you kind of did that, naturally.
And that's something I've carried through. So I'm glad and not surprised that Jake does something similar. So what I've always done is I never had IT meetings in IT. So you know how you have weekly meetings with your leadership team? We always had them. So like when I was at the Cleveland Clinic, we never had them in IT, or rarely had them in IT. We would have them in the business units, and then we would meet with the executives of those particular business units, and then we'd go to the institutes. We had 23 different clinical institutes. So like heart and vascular, we would meet in their offices. They would come in for half the meeting, the leadership. So we'd talk about how we could improve, what else is going on, strategy, those sort of things. We'd take tours. Then we did the hospitals. So we had 15 or so hospitals, and we'd do the same thing with the hospital leadership. Then we take tours. So I always had my team, and then my teams would do that cascade right down to their teams. So I always had our teams always spend time in the shoes of our customers. And then the last thing I did a couple other things, but just maybe it'll help someone in the audience, is I took a clinical position at the Cleveland Clinic. So I was on the medical staff at Cleveland Clinic. And remember, I told you I was an anesthesia tech. So I was like, hey, can I work in anesthesia? I want to work one shift in the OR every week so I can see patients, I can see clinicians, I can understand how everything works. And I want to be sort of undercover. I don't want people to know. It's not like a celebrity thing. And so I did. And only one or two people knew that I was down there. And that was fascinating. And then I would volunteer every week in the cancer center just as a regular volunteer. So I'd have this patient interaction. So those are simple things that anyone can do. So Jake's right on with his examples. But you need to, no matter what position you are or how long you've served in healthcare, you need to be out there with the people that you serve.
For sure. We'll fast forward to today. What are you working on today when it comes to the digital patient experience?
Yeah, so, as CEO of Divurgent, now I'm helping a lot of different organizations in this particular journey, and they're all at different places, as you might imagine. I'm sure you encounter as well. But it's really making technology so personal, it's like the human touch. And that's really what I'm after and wanting to help all of our clients with is, technology is great. We love it, right? It can do a lot of things, a lot of good in the world and a lot of good in healthcare, but it has to be so personal. It is like that human touch. So how do you do that? How do you really make it? I hate using the buzzwords, but people understand what I'm talking about when I use them, seamless, transparent, I love the voice, and what you all are doing, and the conversational AI, I think is key to the future. We're hearing about that now on the clinical side, but I think it needs to come to the patient side. And so that's exciting to work on as well.
So any specific project that you're working on? Because my next question is asking how you measure the success, what KPIs you define when it comes to guaranteeing successful outcomes of digital transformation projects.
Yeah, so the one that I can give you the best data points on just completed a few months ago, but the organization involved, they won, like the CIO there won Innovator of the Year as a result. But it had to do with patient experience, but not maybe as touch-like as we're talking about. But, it was really around remote patient monitoring. So, patients don't want to go to the hospital. It's not a fun place, no matter how beautiful your lobby might look. And so you need to do whatever you can to treat them where they're most comfortable. And for most of them, it's home. Not all of them, but most of them. And so we set up this capability to do remote patient monitoring. And for this specific patient cohort, ones that had a comorbidity like of CHF. And we coupled that with RPMs. They had CHF and another comorbidity, and they had a 30% mortality rate, meaning 30% of this particular patient population was dying of COVID. When we did the RPM, so now from a patient experience, they were being monitored like every hour, not just, on a episodic basis. And then that way the clinicians could be proactive when they notice something, going out of variance. And as a result, they went down to 0% mortality.
Wow.
So that saved people's lives, which again is really my passion and why I do the things that I do. And so we're hoping to publish this in a journal because it was quite a dramatic experience for those patients, and that's why they won the Innovator of the Year. So that's a recent project where we had measurable KPIs, which was mortality rate was the main one.
Quite a rate, quite an impressive rate. I'm curious, when it comes to these digital transformation projects, what are some challenges that healthcare executives in charge of these projects face?
Having effective governance. Now, we've been talking about governance in IT for so long, and because no one or very few people have solved it. I've been fortunate to work at some organizations where we took a different approach, and it really helped, because this is what happens. So the problem, and you know this, is everyone's doing some great things. Like I don't want to mention who I just met with earlier today. It's exactly what's going on in their organization. And so it's very common. So they're doing some great things with IT, like amazing things. But it's what I would call a pocket of brilliance. They had a different term, but similar. I wish I could remember. It was very clever. And the experience, though, for the patient was really uneven. So our goal, and so this is what's lacking. What's lacking is the ability to go from pockets of brilliance to enterprises of excellence. So the example that I could give you, and this person gave you the exact same one, because again, it's common. You could go and look at their digital front door. It is awesome. So they did a lot of the right things. It looks good. It's easy to navigate. But if you want to really have meaningful interaction with their health system, or with health systems where I've been, you'd have to have more than that one app. So it's a pocket of brilliance, right? It's a great app. So if I have cancer, let's say cancer, I have cancer, and it's a cancer app for their cancer institute. Awesome. But I have to, as a cancer patient, I have to not only interact with the cancer institute, but other parts of the organization as well. I got to get different labs, might have radiology, other disciplines. And so now I need their generic patient portal as an example. So it's cool app, but it's not a patient satisfier, because now I've got multiple apps for the same organization. So again, the biggest problem is it's related to governance. It's pockets of brilliance and trying to move to these enterprises of excellence. I think this person called them random acts of brilliance, or something like that was his particular phrase. So it's like a random, but it doesn't need to be random. It shouldn't be random. And it comes back to governance. It comes back to, how do these organizations, do they have a strategy? And many of them don't. So what's interesting, and not to go down too far on a rabbit trail, but
Please.
A lot of people will say they have a strategy. If you ask to see the strategy, there is no written strategy. So yes, there's no doubt. They're not telling you a lie. They have talked about it, but no one's written it down and with definition and with KPI, like your earlier question, how do you know a project is successful, especially one around patient experience or consumer experience? Right. How do you know? And so they never get down to that layer of granularity. So as a result, people they can associate and justify any pocket of brilliance to whatever that one statement is about their strategy. But because it's not written, codified, there's no roadmap, they never get to where they really want to go. And then they spend all their money on these pockets of brilliance, and there's no money left at the end to do sort of that enterprise of excellence. So that's probably the biggest challenge. And I talk to a lot of CEOs, so this is not just CIOs or CMIOs, but this is coming straight from CEOs as well.
So it's pockets of brilliance, but you also need the brilliance of unifying the project and having a very concise roadmap as far as what we want to see ahead. What would be your advice for a CIO that would want to take on such a project? What would they have to do in practical terms to actually make it a brilliant pocket, on all ends?
Yeah, I think they really have to nail down governance. And when they do, is develop a strategy that is signed off by the executive team. And so sometimes we do get a strategy and we do have an IT committee, but it's not the executive team. And when I say executive team, I'm talking about the C-suite. So the ideal governance structure is when the C-suite is the governing body for all decisions related to digital or tech, however you want to say it. So because otherwise what happens is a lot of people spend a lot of time in committees, a lot of meeting time, and they might come up with some ideas and actually write down a plan, but then someone at the C-suite says no. And so I'd rather get all of that out of the way very transparently in the beginning. So what I do, yes, I definitely have committees to where I'm getting all the clinical input you need, all the business input, all the tech input, but then it's going straight to the C-suite. And so I did that at the Cleveland Clinic. So I asked for 30 minutes once a month for IT governance at the C-suite, and that's where we did it. So I said, here's the recommendations that have come up. I need your approval, because then the CFO was right there saying yes or no. There was no politics behind the scenes that often happens in large organizations, maybe small organizations as well. Everything was on the table and everyone heard the same thing. So if you committed in front of the CEO, who was my co-chair, it was done deal. It was codified, ratified, written in the books, in the budget, done. And so that's where you really need to get to. And then from there, you've got a platform to write the strategy, to write the roadmap, because the roadmap approval happens at that same level. So everyone's in on it. And of course, the smart CIO will always include everyone at that table in writing that roadmap. They don't go off and do it by themselves. No. They get all the opinions of naysayers. They get the opinions of the influentials, those people that are super influential but may not have the title. They get the people's input with the title. And then when they go back to that steering committee, that plan, they don't even have to be the presenter. So I did exactly that. So what I'm sharing with you is sort of a best practice that I've actually done. So this is not theory or consultant talking. When we presented the plan to the C-suite, I didn't say anything. It was members of the C-suite or their direct reports. So when there was time for anyone to say, almost like at a wedding, when you say, is there anyone here who wants to say, it was all transparent and they had to object right there in front of anyone. And no one did. Why? Because they were part of the process. All their objections came out way earlier. So if you do that, your chances of success just went up tenfold. That's
such a great nugget of advice, and a practical nugget of advice from your own personal experience. And I'm sure many people enjoy learning from you. Can I ask those naysayers, what are some reasons you get pushback?
Sometimes people have their own, they have a bad experience with you, with IT, with a vendor, and they're jaded. So they've had this bad experience and there's no trust. So it's really important to identify naysayers way in advance and win their trust. So I always believe in personal relationships. So I always created opportunities to hang out. And if they didn't come to those, because I would do generic ones and invite anyone, if they didn't come and I knew they were a naysayer or influential, I would go to them, of course. And so I've always found that breaking bread together or sharing a glass of wine or beer, whatever the juice, really does a lot to take a naysayer off their position. Or you learn more about why they're a naysayer, and maybe they have some very valid points. And so you need to really listen. I'm thinking of like real life examples, as I'm sharing this with you. So that's one thing. The other thing is you have to win their trust, develop the relationship, but then prove yourself. So it's one thing to, hey, let's have a meal together and sing Kumbaya, which I believe in, but then you've got to prove it. And so I've asked people for chances. I said, give us a chance. I said, I know you don't want to do this, and I understand your reasons why. And here's 2 things we're doing to make sure we've mitigated your angst. Give us a chance. And if we blow it, then I'm with you. We're not going to do it. And there's been times before where I've agreed with a naysayer and we didn't do it, what they suggested. And I said, let's wait a year. I don't think we're ready. I agree with you. Let's wait a year and see how we mature. And I've done that before too. And that speaks volumes to the organization as well, that you're willing to listen and take action on that listening, even though it's not what you preferred.
Is there an example of a time when you agreed to just not go with something, but today, looking back, how would you have pushed more?
We were implementing, so I'm going to kind of be a little bit generic, is nothing negative against the company, but I'll just be generic. Sure. Where we had an enterprise radiology solution. Everything was with the same vendor. So we had an enterprise vendor. But this particular institute really didn't feel comfortable with that particular vendor's radiology offering. It was a little bit less mature, and there's a lot of different reasons. And I agreed with them that we would wait a year. And that was a good decision, because if you force something, it's not going to go well. So that was the thing. I was like, I know it's the right decision to do the enterprise solution. I know it is. And the political capital that it would take to force it, I would spend all of it and I'd be without political capital. And you have to think about those things. I'd lose that relationship with that institute, which is very important to the organization. Right. And their hearts wouldn't be in it. So the chances of success just went down. So for those reasons, I said, you know what, let's just go with what they want to do and revisit a year later, which has been revisited. And now they're moving to the enterprise solution. It was just the right thing, but here's, going back to the relationship is I took that individual during this 1 year period and I asked them to visit our data center. And I'm not a proponent of data centers. I believe in the cloud and all that, but this was, 3-4 years ago, and our organization quite hadn't made that switch yet. And he showed up, and after an hour, I had to go. I had another obligation. He stayed for another hour. He was so fascinated by how the data center reminded him of the circulatory system of the heart and the body.
Wow.
And looking at the networks and literally looking at the cabling and the infrastructure. He was so fascinated. Anyways, that led to his decision to go with the enterprise solution, was hanging out in our data center and learning more. He gained trust. He saw the people there. He talked to the management there. He gained respect. He gained trust, and that's really what sort of healed everything. And they ultimately went with the enterprise solution. But had I forced it, he would have never come out to visit. It would have been negative, and we would have had a bad relationship, and it wouldn't have been good ultimately for our patients and our practicing clinicians. So I'm glad we did what we did.
We are going to play a game where you place your digital bets, okay? I'm going to name a technology in healthcare, and you tell me if it's bullish or bearish. You ready?
Ready.
Awesome. Number 1, telehealth.
Bullish. Consumers want choices, and that as soon as hospitals catch up to consumers, I thought we would have through the pandemic, and we didn't. We kind of enticed consumers back to the hospital, which is the weirdest thing. My very progressive health system, where I led the digital strategy, and we were like, 50% of visits are going to be all virtual. This was pre-pandemic. They were like sending me emails. Hey, it's safe to come back. Why don't you come back in? And I was like, no, wrong answer. But I think consumers, so we did go like, up to 70%, some organizations down to about an average now of 10%. I think it's kind of flattened out. I think it's going to push back up. So I think it's just a matter of time that consumers are going to continue to push, and all the digital natives that are coming in, disrupting and being only telemedicine. I think it's going to really finally force the hospitals to go back to telemedicine.
Okay. All right. Next one, bullish or bearish? Wearables.
Bearish. And the reason is until someone figures out how to make it really easy for the clinician. There's so many different wearables for so many different conditions. There's just so much M&A that needs to happen in there before we go on the bullish side. I think it can be maybe in 5-10 years. We'll see a lot more practical things. But right now, the clinicians, they don't want all these different data points coming in. It's very time consuming for them. So we need to figure out a layer on top of all that, either a layer on top of all that takes out, all the things they don't need to know about and just presents the important things, or there is a platform that comes out that can do 80% of what all these niche providers do.
Bullish or bearish? Conversational AI.
Bullish. So I think it's going to take still a little while longer to perfect it. I know you all doing a good job. But to where it becomes like you and I talking right now, I think we're getting a lot closer. But this is the future. No one wants to use their hands anymore. It's kind of silly. We should just all be able to talk. And we all know these capabilities exist today. Now it's a matter of perfecting it for healthcare. So So very bullish on this.
Bullish or bearish? We're almost done. I know what you're going to say about this one, but remote patient monitoring.
Oh yeah, bullish. So again, patients don't want to be in the hospital. Hospitals are beautiful. I think we've overbuilt. I think we're going to learn that we overbuilt, not for acute care, but for things that are non-acute care. And so this is going to become more predominant. And we're seeing it already. Insurance companies are doing it. Some progressive providers are doing it. So we're going to see more and more because it goes back to the consumer and making technology so personal, like the human touch. It's like the satisfactions, right? So the early indicators that we've heard about are patients are more satisfied. The outcomes are the same or better, and it's half the price. So it answers a lot of the challenges that we face today in healthcare.
Last one, augmented reality, bullish or bearish?
Bullish eventually. So it's going to take a little while longer still. I've done some things and very successful, but all early stages. I think it's going to still be a little while, but I've loved what I've seen. A lot of good organizations are doing little experiments like what we did. Like we did simple things like while kids were getting their cancer treatments, they would be at the zoo, walking around the zoo. So we've seen things like that. We did some facial reconstruction surgery where augmented reality was really important to make sure that there was a really good outcome. So we're going to see more of it. I think it's going to take a little while longer.
Okay. I love that they're at the zoo. I think adults should be at the zoo as well when they're getting these treatments.
Yes.
Why is it only kids, right? We have an inner child.
They shouldn't have all the fun. Yeah, I agree with you there.
Exactly. Speaking of technologies, are there any emerging technologies on your wish list when it comes to patient engagement?
I already touched on it a little bit, but I think voice is so key because, I'll never forget. So we do patient rounding. That's another thing that everyone should be doing on a regular basis, not this once a year thing that's almost trite. I'm talking on a very regular basis. So I was rounding on a patient one time and I came in and he had no arms and legs. And it occurred to me, it's like so obvious, but it occurred to me, well, how is he using our, portal? Well, he was actually a very proficient user at the portal using his mouth and a special pen. And they had set him up to where he was really good at it. But I thought not everyone is going to be so skilled as he was and so motivated necessarily.
Right.
So not everyone, we take it for granted that we can type or what if they're elderly, and don't have, the keyboards are pretty small on our phones. And so don't have that easy or they're blind. There's a lot of use cases, as you know, where voice would just simply be better. And for everyday use too, it's just faster. It's more clear. I just think that that's an area that's really going to disrupt things. I remember working in the OR, like I told you, and all of the things that the clinicians had to touch during a surgery that could have been voice activated or voice responsive, or even better is, and so I can see this with patients as well. But even better is that ambient capability in the OR where the voice would listen for all the safety measures to have been taking place just automatically. And if they didn't take place, maybe a red light flashes or a beep, there's an alarm. And it's like, hey, safety alert. You didn't introduce all the members of the care team. So, or you didn't say left side, right side, whatever it might be. So I could see the same with a patient and just being able to interact with their caregivers, just a lot of opportunity to really make it much more personal.
Okay, we're reeling down to our more personal questions because I just love who you are. Best career advice you've been given or best career advice for a CIO
I've received a lot because I'm a big believer in mentoring, and I've had many formal mentoring relationships. And I recall when I first became CIO, I was really young. No one taught me, so I didn't have someone who sort of mentored me into that. And so I reached back to the CIO at HCA. So it was Noel Williams at the time. So I reported up through her. And I said, Noel, my gosh, my dream came true. I suddenly got the CIO job, but I'm scared to death. What do I do? And I wish I probably have saved this email someplace. She said, Ed, here's the best advice I can give you. She said, people are not your most treasured asset. And I was like, what? Everyone says people are your greatest asset. What is she talking about? She said, the right people in the right place are your greatest asset. So make your assessment very quickly and make sure you've got the right people in the right place, and everything will work out. And so I took that to heart and really cleared up my team pretty quick. And we ended up having a stellar team that did dramatic things. I mean, we're Gartner wrote us up in one of their case studies how dramatically we turned that organization around from a technology point of view. And the times in my career, because I've made mistakes, and there's a couple times in my career where I did not do what she told me because I let some other emotion get in the way. It bit me every time. And so I really hold that as the best advice, because when I followed it, stellar outcome. When I didn't follow it, I paid the price. I can tell you 3 examples right off the top of my head where I've made some difficult decisions. Letting people go, it's no fun. It's something I don't like to do, but I did it. And in all 3 situations, it just differed in terms of how long the time was. But I'll just give you one story. Maybe a year and a half later, I was at a conference. I was leaving the conference, walking to my car, and someone called my name, Ed. And I turned around, it was a guy I'd fired a year and a half ago. And when I fired him, he was really upset, but it was the right thing to do. And so he ran out of the office yelling type of thing, kind of awkward. But that was the last time I'd seen him. And so now I got ready for a punch. So I was literally went into fight mode, flight or fight or whatever.
Yeah.
I got ready. Is the guy going to swing at me? And then he reached out and put his hand on my arm. He started crying. And he said, I know that was a difficult decision for you at that time. And you didn't know it, but I was going through some really bad things in my life. And that's what kind of how I lost focus at work. And you did the right thing. And it really changed me. So I took some time to reflect. I changed my life around. And today I'm now a CIO at some other health system. And we were both crying and hugging. And so
I'm crying.
Yeah. But I know I'm getting kind of teary thinking about the situation too. It was 10 years ago. But it was the right thing to do. And I wish I had done it for this other person that I'm thinking about where it came to bit me, because that person's still probably the same person he was. And he's probably having the same issues in his new gig. And I should have been leader enough to let him go and help him. But I didn't. And it came to bit me, and it's probably biting him today.
When we live and we learn, right? Which next industry event will we catch you at?
So I'm in my new role, right, as CEO at Divurgent, and I'll probably be at a lot of different places. I tend to speak a lot anyways. And so I've recently, just in this month in May, I was a keynote Ohio hymns and Texas hymns. And then the fun one was in Salt Lake City for a marketing, healthcare marketing. And I'm finding that that's probably more where I'm going to spend more of my time is with strategic leaders and transformational leaders and CEOs and marketing, because that's where, a lot of this digital is sort of moving to. That's a topic for a whole nother podcast, and it's not a popular one. Some of my former peers don't like it when I talk about it, but there's a lot of CDOs coming into the industry from outside of healthcare, and it's good, but it's also a reflection, perhaps, of us not doing all that we could have done or should have been doing for our organizations to prepare for consumerism. And so a lot of that has shifted to marketing and strategy in different areas or whole new digital areas that are separate from IT. So spending a lot of time there, but definitely, hymns and chime are still my go-to type of places.
Right, right. That you write about that in your book as well, about folks who come in from different industries and also how the healthcare industry can learn from them and what they can bring to the table. So amazing. So Ed, who would you like to nominate as our future guest, a trailblazer in the industry, someone making an impact?
Yeah, there's two people. So one is Daniel Baracci from New York Presby. So he's my running buddy whenever I'm in New York. We've been longtime friends. He always impresses me. Every time I hear him speak or talk, I'm always impressed. We go on these runs and we're like mentor each other, on these runs, and he tells me about a problem and maybe I've got some ideas and vice versa. He's full of knowledge. He's a great leader. So he would be one. Another one, more non-traditional, would be Jared Johnson. So Jared was a former marketing director for a hospital. He's very progressive thinking. He then has since left working for hospitals. He's kind of struck out on his own, trying to provide support to hospitals that will use him. But he's a very leading edge thinker when it comes to consumerism. So I've hung out with him. I've learned from him. I've listened to his podcasts. He really helps. If all CIOs would listen to him, they get a lot of great ideas, what they can do in their organizations.
Thank you, Ed, for taking the time to share your unique perspective. And thank you to our audience for tuning into Patient Journey Pioneers. Ed, we're going to see you at the next event.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. You're a great person, great organization, and I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Patient Journey Pioneers, brought to you by Hyro. Subscribe to our podcast on your favorite listening platform. See you on our next episode.